Two balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. It's his way back. Walk the ball. Chris Taylor.
What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined tonight by Matthew Moreno, Daniel Starkand, a little impromptu post-game show that's mostly going to focus on the biggest news story of the night. Yes, the Dodgers beat the Pirates 4-1, but the big story is that River Ryan leaves this game injured. He threw just 56 pitches, was looking fantastic, was out pitching Paul Skeens, if you can believe it, but then leaves this game early. And Matt, it's like a cloud hanging over. 2 in a row against the Pirates, a game against Skeens that maybe a lot of people weren't expecting to win, and they win comfortably, and yet the worst possible outcome, it feels like, with River Ryan facing serious injury.
Yeah, I mean, even, given the close NL West race that the Dodgers now find themselves in, I think 10 times out of 10, they would trade tonight's game if it meant losing the game, but keeping River Ryan healthy. I think they absolutely would do that. The initial report so far is forearm tightness from the Dodgers. I know Dave Roberts is about to speak with media. We do have Blake there. Not sure if River Ryan will talk, but if he does, Blake will definitely get that interview and some quotes as well. So definitely stick around to our channel once we're done here with this sort of breaking news for the wrong reason, unfortunately.
Yeah. Daniel, there were some reports initially when the injury happened. So he throws a pitch. His second to last pitch actually is when the injury happened. And you could see he kind of hooks it a little bit and he shakes out his arm, which is the worst possible thing you could see a pitcher do. And even like, I would encourage people, if you go back, he looks over to the dugout while he's on the mound holding the ball as if like, wait, did anybody else see that? Then he throws another pitch and then looks like he's going to try and throw a third pitch. Barnes comes out, Roberts comes out, and it's immediately over. There was some initial reporting that he had a blister, which apparently was true, but those tweets were later deleted because it seems, Daniel, we've unfortunately seen this movie before. The right forearm tightness lines up with what we saw, which is 99 times out of 100, pretty much worst case scenario.
Yeah. Me and Matt were talking just before this, and I was telling him how, like, back when I used to pitch, I dealt with some elbow issues, and I've seen that shake of the arm before. We've seen it with Dodger pitchers as well, and that you definitely don't do that for a blister. Like, a majority of the time, like you said, this is an elbow situation, most likely Tommy John. We'll see when he'll undergo more tests and such, and they'll figure it out, and hopefully, it's not the worst case scenario. Like, maybe it's just, something where he could rest for a while and he avoids, Tommy John surgery, but it definitely didn't look good. Like you said, he tried to stay in there. And even when Dave Roberts was pretty much walking him off the mound, he was still trying to stay in there, which I guess is just like a credit to his competitiveness. Yeah. But yeah, obviously, they're going to get him out of there and see what's up, because it definitely, didn't look good.
Yeah, and Matt, we've been on this channel even over the last few days as we've talked about starting pitchers and the health that the Dodgers have. And Ryan was beginning to be, not even beginning, I think, on anybody that you would have asked outside of, Flaherty, Glasnow, and Yamamoto, if healthy. I think River Ryan had quickly established himself as the clear next guy in that list, ahead of Kershaw, ahead of Stone, ahead of Buehler, ahead of Miller, ahead of Robleski, ahead of Knack. River Ryan was not only starting to feel like that guy, but a guy that you didn't necessarily hate in that spot, which is, I think, there's the personal side of a young guy that's going to have to deal with this. And then there's the fan of a team side in which, I'm not going to say it's devastating for the Dodgers, but it's awful. It's awful.
Yeah. I mean, I had Kershaw still ahead of him just because I think the Dodgers were going to, as long as Kershaw didn't fully implode, like he was going to be in their rotation. But I get the point that you're certainly making. Yeah, I mean, River Ryan, as we're sitting here now, was easily going to be in the postseason rotation. And to Daniel's point, like, we are sort of reacting to this in live time right now. And so far, the only information we have is that it is a forearm issue and it is some tightness. We have seen pitchers in the past overcome this, as Daniel said, with a little bit of rest. So we do want to still exercise some caution. He's not fully gone yet. We don't necessarily know. And even whatever they say tonight, they're really not going to know. Yeah. I mean, I guess I mean, we'll take that back. They could do probably something like the manual testing where they could see if it is like a UCL issue. And if they do that and it's very clear, then they'll come out and say it. But there's a good chance that we don't necessarily get the full picture until Sunday after he has an MRI and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, the River Ryan, as you said, the personal stuff for him aside and what it could mean for his outlook, like the Dodgers are suddenly in a very dangerous spot with looking again, like they'll get through the regular season. Landon Knack can come up and I don't want to say eat innings because I feel like that carries a little bit of a negative connotation, but he can
carries Lance Lynn. That's Lance Lynn vibes. Let's not go there.
Knack can come up and make starts for them, and the Dodgers will be just fine. But like we have always said, this team is playing for October, and that's now, we're here pretty much middle of August, more or less. Regular season's winding down, and the Dodgers are trying to get enough guys healthy to sort of piece this together. And another potential option for them is now appearing to probably be off the table. We don't know just yet, but it does look that way.
Yeah, let's talk about that because, Daniel, I think the biggest conversation as Dodgers fans, for those of us who are, covering this team to a degree and discussing this team, is where do the Dodgers go from here? So we mentioned the two guys, Glasnow and Flaherty, who are, as long as they are healthy, they will be in the postseason rotation. Behind them, you've got Yamamoto, if healthy, which has thrown a couple bullpens. All the reports have been positive. It doesn't mean he's for sure going to be back and back soon, but by all accounts, there have not been setbacks yet. So that's a positive piece of information. And again, another guy that, if healthy and if available, I think is pretty clearly going to be in that group. Then we're left with the rest of this crew to find at least one, because again, if you haven't been following the way the playoffs are scheduled out, you almost for sure need 4 different starting pitchers. Now you could go bullpen game, that kind of a thing. But in that 4th spot, the Dodgers are going to be choosing between, it seems like, Clayton Kershaw, who has made 2 starts since coming back, one really, really bad, one encouraging. You've got Bobby, 3 starts, excuse me, 3 starts. You've got Bobby Miller, who has been a mess this year, went down to the minor leagues and has continued to be a mess. I believe was scratched from his last start. You've got Walker Buehler, who's due back this week, who has been it's been a massive struggle for him. Again, I would say at the minor league level as well, although his last start was encouraging. You got Gavin Stone, who's been really good for the first couple months of the season, really bad for the last month of the season. You've got Robleski and you've got Knack, 2 guys who have come up and performed pretty well, but I don't think anybody is like super fired up about the idea of them pitching meaningful postseason games. So on one hand, given all of the injuries that the Dodgers have had, it's pretty remarkable that I could still list off 6 different options of guys they could go to. On the flip side, to the point that one of you guys made earlier, for the aspirations that this team has, that's not exactly the bucket that you want to be picking from.
Yeah, for sure. And look, like there definitely are worse spots to be in. Like there are teams out there that would be killing for those to be, their options. And there's still a possibility that one or multiple of those guys could give you quality innings. But I think like of that bunch, like River Ryan has the highest ceiling. Like, we've only seen him, for a short stint here, but the stuff is electric. He's got the makeup, he's got the poise. So that's kind of why, A, we're so excited about him, and B, why we're so disappointed at the thought of this potential injury here. But yeah, I mean, there are, you listed like 5 guys. Gavin Stone is someone who is maybe in the lead now, him and Kershaw, I guess, but Gavin Stone has been struggling lately. So he's kind of gonna have to turn, like there's more pressure on him now to kind of turn that around, I guess. Like you broke it down with Buehler and Bobby Miller. Like those aren't guys you could count on at the moment. Like, the talent is there, so maybe they could flip a switch, but I wouldn't, necessarily bet on it this season. Yeah. So, Kershaw and Gavin Stone, and look, Yamamoto, he's no guarantee either. No. Like we're talking about him as the number 3 guy, but if he is not pitching in October, I don't think any of us would be surprised. So you may be talking about needing 2 of these guys now. So that's what makes it even worse. So there's a lot to sort out. They still do have like 2 months here to kind of figure it out, but there definitely are a lot of question marks right now, and this only adds to it.
Matt, you had Kershaw ahead of River Ryan. Do you want to talk us into Walker Buehler while you're on that corner?
Yeah, I mean, you better get ready to count on Walker Buehler because he's coming back this week, a few more days, and he's going to be starting for the Dodgers. And the plan, Dave Roberts said today, was they would go to a 6-man rotation just at least one time through because they are in the middle of playing 13 games in a row. And of course, just every time, maybe that's what needs to happen. Dave needs to stop saying, we're going to do a 6-man rotation, because every time he starts bringing that up,
Yeah.
I'm convinced there's an injury, and then the pitcher coming back is now replacing somebody who's gotten hurt. But yeah, I mean, he's Buehler, Kershaw, these guys, they've been there before, so be ready for a little bit more of them.
Yeah, I'm with you. Who knows? I mean, it's gonna be. I still think, like, even Landon Knack made 8 starts and has like a 3 ERA. Justin Robleski throws 100 miles an hour from the left-hand side. So I still think there's a world that, like, even if we get down to that point and it's like, okay, can Landon Knack start a game and Robleski piggyback? And can we get like 5 to 6 innings combined out of those two guys? Because one's a righty, one's a lefty, one's more of a command not soft tosser, but he's not throwing upper 90s. And then Robleski comes in behind him, or vice versa. Like, I'm the optimistic guy. We all know that. Like, I still think if those are all of the options, like, that to me is a better option than Bobby Miller or Walker Buehler, the way that those two guys have looked so far this season. So we'll see kind of how these things shake out. But, it does feel like the Dodgers are going to have some choices to make. Let's say that there's going to be some auditions, and one minor thing that I was thinking of was I was secretly hoping that Buehler coming back meant Gavin Stone might get like a little phantom IL stint to catch his breath and rest his body. And it's hard to imagine that's going to happen after something like this. Again, they do have options in Knack and Robleski, but that's we'll see. Matt, it sounds like we are starting to get some information out of the Dodgers. What are we hearing about River Ryan and the update that we have post game?
Yeah, so Blake is tweeting from Dave Roberts' press conference right now after the game. He says that River Ryan is getting an MRI tomorrow, which is Sunday. He's going to go on the IL. Dodgers don't have any other info right now besides forearm tightness. River Ryan did lobby to stay in the game to face what would have potentially been the last hitter for that third out. Dave Roberts also said that Ryan only felt it on the last pitch that he threw, which I thought was interesting because, like, you very clearly can see the second to last pitch he started shaking his arm. So that's kind of interesting. But yeah, I mean, that's where stuff stands now. We're just
as far as we know, we are getting Dave Roberts recounting conversations with River Ryan, right? River Ryan has not spoken to the media.
Correct. This is information from Dave Roberts. So my guess is once he's done, they'll open the clubhouse. I don't know if River Ryan will be there. They may, like, when players are injured, they kind of let it go both ways. If they want to talk, then yeah. But if he's, devastated, upset, like, certainly understandable. I don't think they'll force him to speak about it tonight.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the good news is Dave Roberts didn't really give us an update that we could possibly have issue with, although he did manage to say something that is, like, unequivocally wrong by anybody who watched. I mean, like, if it's true that he only felt it on the last pitch, I would love to know what happened on the second last pitch when he started shaking his arm. So somehow Dave, didn't even really give an update and still said something wrong here, Daniel.
I mean, it's not really surprising, take it with a grain of salt. But yeah, I mean, I guess they'll get the MRI tomorrow and we'll get the real update, but definitely don't feel encouraged by the fact that, anything that was said or anything that we saw tonight. Again, we'll hope for the best, but obviously, for a young pitcher like River Ryan, this is, pretty devastating. And I mean, we just talked about what it means for the Dodgers, and it's obviously a big blow as well.
Yeah. Some more info. Robert's hopeful it isn't a serious injury, but they just don't know much yet. Didn't want to speculate about how long Ryan would be out, but did note that they're getting late in the season and running out of time. So, I think clearly the right thing to do, not to speculate. Like, we all know what the likely outcome is, but there's no reason to say out loud the likely outcome until it's confirmed by doing scans and that kind of a thing. So I would imagine, Monday is probably the day that maybe we get in more information. I'm sure they'll do scans before, but Sunday games sometimes feel, you would know best, Matt. Like, I don't feel like Sunday games are really a great opportunity to get information just because of, the early start times typically.
Yeah, it can be hit or miss. If there is going to be an update on him tomorrow, it would be probably after the game Sunday. I think at the time we're talking to Dave Roberts before 110 starts, it's yes, he's on his way to the doctor, or he's there now, he's getting the MRI. Maybe we'll have it after the game. And then at that point, it's like 50-50 whether or not they do. We'll be there. So hopefully, just follow us on Twitter, on YouTube, and we'll definitely have whatever is said.
Yeah, because then they go on the road Monday. And so, the folks that are following the team and asking questions and whatnot shrinks a little bit. But of course, so again, if you're just now joining us, River Ryan leaves the game early with forearm tightness. The update is that there's no real update. He's going to get a scan. They're hopeful that it's not a long-term injury, but while he was fighting to stay in the game, clearly that was not the right decision by the Dodgers. And so updates to come in the next couple of days. Daniel, one thing I've seen on social media, and we've talked about on our show as well, is kind of the question, is this a reflection on Dodgers training staff? All of these guys that got injured, I posted a tweet earlier of like, hey, here's all of the things that needed to happen for the Dodgers pitching situation to get where it is currently today. Yamamoto shoulder injury, Buehler coming back and struggling, Bobby Miller stock down, Dustin May esophagus, River Ryan forearm, Emmett Sheehan elbow surgery, Clayton Kershaw, who knows? I missed some. Kyle Hurt has been injured. Nick Frasso, beginning of the season. Some people referred to a couple Dodgers pitchers that maybe had some off the field stuff that took them off of this list. But I mean, there's some of that is just struggles. Kershaw, Buehler, Bobby Miller, those aren't like new injury things that happened as much as recovering from injuries or just struggling. But Frasso, Sheehan, Ryan, Yamamoto, I mean, Dustin May was injured, but the esophagus, I don't think you could blame the Dodgers for the esophagus, to be determined. But I mean, as you look at this list, obviously the position players we haven't mentioned, is this a poor reflection on the Dodgers training staff in your estimation, or is this just bad luck?
I'd say it's impossible for any of us to know, if we're being completely honest. Like, if anyone had these answers, they would be making a lot of money working for, these teams.
Yeah.
First of all, this is a league-wide issue. And I do think, look, there is a laundry list of Dodgers pitchers that have gone down with arm injuries in the last few years. And it's gotten to the point where it is kind of impossible to just ignore and say, like, it's just a coincidence. Like, it is a glaring number of issues, but I don't know if any of us know what the answers here. Like, there's so many factors at play, and a lot of this goes back to when these guys were young and pitching a lot and throwing curveballs when they were 8 years old and whatnot. And there's other factors as well up here, like the pitch clock, I think, is a factor that a lot of people aren't talking about. There was a play. River Ryan made an incredible play off the mound today, and then he got a pitch clock violation right after because he didn't sprint back to the mound and throw a pitch or whatever. Like, first of all, that is ridiculous in my opinion. Like, off on another tangent, like that, have a little feel there. Like, let him take a deep breath and catch his breath before he has to pitch, because that could potentially, like, if you're out of breath and a little fatigued, you might try to throw harder with your arm, and that could add extra wear and tear and eventually lead to an injury. So I just think there's a million factors at play, and I'm not a doctor, so I can't really answer the question. And I know it's frustrating. There's been a lot of injuries, but I think, like, I don't think it's as simple as saying fire the whole training staff. Like, they're bringing in new people will fix it. Like, I don't know what the solution is. Like, these guys are throwing harder than they ever have before. So it's kind of unavoidable, but it has been a lot of guys in the Dodgers organization the last few years.
Yeah. And, one note real quick, it's being reported that Landon Knack is going to come up and sort of offer some bullpen relief. Probably, I imagine, take River Ryan's spot in the rotation if he's still on the roster by the time that spot comes back up. So we did get that. But Matt, one of the things my sort of not philosophy, I don't even say theory, because I don't think this is like a secret or a unique idea to me. I think the Dodgers just go after guys where the ceiling is higher and the risk is higher. Like, I think they are just comfortable saying, we're not that interested in a bunch of guys who are for sure going to get us 200 innings with low ceilings. We're going to go after the Garrett Crochet types of the world, where there's definitely risk in these guys because of how hard they throw and because of the spin rate and because of all that. And they're going to say, but if we get enough of these guys healthy in October, then we're going to have the best roster in baseball when we get there. So I do think it's hard for me to pin so much of this on the training staff because I think organizationally, the philosophy has been we have a higher risk tolerance for this type of thing. How do you read between those sort of two data points? A, the injuries, but also kind of the guys they go after and sign and develop and draft and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, real quick before I answer that, Blake just tweeted right now that River Ryan said he felt the tightness in the third inning, used a Theragun on it, and wanted to keep pitching. He also said that he isn't concerned with the forearm issue. So, I mean, maybe he's trying to be optimistic. Maybe he knows something we don't. Like, nobody knows like your own body than that person. So, we'll give him a little bit of a benefit of the doubt. But I think we've seen this play out other ways, unfortunately. But to your question, I do think that is certainly some of it and a factor. But we've also seen now several young pitchers going down with these elbow, forearm type injuries. And so it's not always like, hey, they're trying to they're doing a lottery ticket play on, a guy
but
who's.
They draft those guys. Like I joked with Robleski that I don't think he was on the Dodgers board until he had Tommy John surgery right before getting drafted. Like I think the number of guys like Bueller already had Tommy John. So I do think philosophically it does extend to the draft. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I do think you see that.
That's fair. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, yeah, that is a factor. I think like Daniel said, ultimately, like there's not really one thing that you can pinpoint and say, okay, like stop doing this or do this one thing differently and everything will be great.
Yeah.
And really, like if you want to trace it all the way back, like does it extend to like Daniel, like Little League where all these kids are throwing as hard as they can and off-speed pitches and curveballs and stuff like that? Like, and how are you going to correct that? Like we've had this discussion too in the past, and there's no pitching coach in baseball right now that's going to go to a pitcher and say, hey, stop throwing so hard. Don't throw as hard anymore. We'll be good. We want to keep you healthy. And even that, to be honest, like that doesn't guarantee that you're going to be healthy either.
Yeah. Yeah. We got a super chat here from Saki Bomb said we could start the year with 30 starters and still have issues filling out a rotation by the year end. This is just wild. To this point, I think you're right. And Daniel, you said this, and I do think this is something that is worth kind of unpacking a little. I do think this is a league-wide issue. Like, I do think the Dodgers, we are obviously like hyper-focused on what happens with our teams and seeing all of these guys go down for the Dodgers. I do think this is happening league-wide, and we're probably just not as aware of it because of, the team that we personally follow. I'm looking just, you can go on ESPN and look at the injuries, but it's like, the Diamondbacks are missing guys like Merrill Kelly's on the 60-day IL. Like, I think there are, that's just the top team on here. I'm not going to be able to go through and read through every team who's on this list and that kind of thing. Spencer Strider's on here for the Atlanta Braves. Like, I think there's lots of teams that have key guys that are out because of arm injuries. And so Daniel, I think you're on to something that it feels so pressing to us because we're Dodger fans, and the Dodgers might be a tick above average, but I also think something's happening. Sticky stuff, pitch clock, whatever it is, increase some of the pitches that are now the sweeper they're saying is like a pitch that is a lot harder. The split change is a pitch that's a lot harder. Like these are all pitches that maybe stress more, but they're more successful. And so anyways, I don't have the evidence right in front of me, but I do think you're onto something there, Daniel.
Yeah, and look, like velocity is as high as it's ever been, and like you said, guys are throwing more sweepers, more like you might have a reliever come in and throw 15 pitches, and 12 of them are sweepers, and then they come in the next night and do the same thing. Like, it's just the stress that's being placed on the elbow and the shoulder is kind of at an all-time high, and it goes back to the Dodgers because, like you were saying, they do target those guys, and obviously everyone wants the guys who have the best stuff, but those are kind of the guys who are at the highest risk. And like Matt was saying, like, it's not, just, anyone could get hurt at any time. Like, it's not just the high velocity type guys, but those are the ones who have the most stress on their arms. So that's kind of what we're seeing. Like River Ryan, in the short cameo we saw him, he flashed some of the best stuff we've seen all season pretty much. It's not like he's thrown 150, 200 innings. Like, he's only thrown like 30 innings or something this season. So it could happen to anyone at any time. It's not always an overwork type issue. Like there's, like we've been talking about, there's just so many factors at play. And that's, it could just happen to anyone at any time.
Matt, it does sound like we are actually hearing from River Ryan. So what's the latest on some quotes coming out of his mouth down in the locker room?
Yeah, so what's kind of interesting is on top of, like he said, he felt it in the third inning. He does think that the pitch clock might have affected him,
Okay.
which he's not the first pitcher to express that. I think if we want to trace that, I think Kenley Jansen might have been first on that train to say, hey, like I think the pitch clock might have an issue, and everybody sort of MLB came out with a study and said, no, like this, they looked at it and this isn't true. But I feel like that's going to be something to sort of watch, and not that River Ryan's going to be a needle mover by any sense, because he is still trying to establish himself in the league. But if that list keeps growing where more and more pitchers say, hey, I think the pitch clock is leading to this stuff, it'll be interesting to see if MLB does sort of adapt at some point, if the Players Association pushes for some changes. River Ryan also said that they ran some initial tests on him and that he still has good strength in his arm. So, I mean, again, like we don't want to overreact one way or the other. We don't want to sit here and get overly optimistic with what he said. We don't want to be completely pessimistic, but maybe he ends up getting away with sort of minimal damage and it's just kind of a flexor tendon strain type thing, and that still puts his season at risk, but at least it's not knocking him out for all of next year as well.
Yeah. This is also, River Ryan's also a guy that just hasn't pitched that much. Like he basically wasn't a full-time pitcher until getting traded to the Dodgers a few years ago. And so when it comes to stuff like the pitch clock, like some of that endurance buildup, the ability to withstand some of that, I'm sure he just doesn't have that muscle memory necessarily yet. And so, we'll see. I believe the quote that I'm seeing on social media was that having 15 seconds between throws, quote, starts to take a toll on you. Daniel mentioned, he comes off the mound, sprints. I think he actually got through the first couple pitches of that next at bat, but it was like the third or fourth pitch when he ends up taking the pitch clock violation. Oral Hershiser started talking about exactly that connection, and they show him on the mound like panting still, like 90 seconds after the play was made. And so you can only imagine, like the logically you can get to a place where you can see how that added stress minus rest on an arm would start to stack up. We do have another super chat here from Rod. Is MLB doing any study on pitching injuries? I mean, I'm sure they sort of are, but the league itself, like Players Association, is probably more likely to be doing it because the league obviously wants their best players healthy, but the league, that I wouldn't say that's their highest priority here, Daniel. Or Matt, have you heard of anything?
Well, I remember what I referenced. I thought that they used like a Harvard study earlier this year that they said, let me see, I'll look it up as you guys kind of talk.
Because there was a book, The Arm, right? Was a book that was written.
Yeah, but was that Passon who wrote that? Or Tim Brown?
I think
somebody
might have been Passon.
But MLB put out something. I remember, Daniel,
Passon.
maybe, I don't know if you remember, Daniel. Wasn't it early this year at some point? There might have been.
I feel like I remember them saying like they were doing like studies on it, but we haven't really seen any sort of results from that or anything. And look, I don't like, if being honest, I don't think anyone has a solution at the moment, at least because it's happening everywhere and it's not showing any signs of kind of slowing down here. And if anyone, like I was saying, if anyone has a solution, they would be making a lot of money right now. But going back real quick, going back to the pitch clock thing, I would kind of compare it to like if you're in the gym and let's say you're doing like sets of push-ups or sets of weights, and I told you instead of resting for 60 seconds between each set, you could only rest for 20 seconds or 30 seconds. Like naturally, you're gonna be fatigued quicker. Like you may be able to keep going, but it's eventually gonna take its toll. You're putting more wear and tear on your arm, having to throw pitches, quicker with less recovery time. Even like, between pitches, like the difference between 15 seconds and 30 seconds is honestly like massive. It doesn't feel like a big difference. And I know, look, we all love how much quicker games are now. So it's not going to change. Like they're going to have to deal with it. The pitch clock is here to stay, but I do think it is a factor. And if they were serious about, limiting injuries and such and wanting to figure out like what they could do, getting rid of the pitch clock would be a good start. But the fact that they would never do that just shows that they're not all in on that,
Yeah. I found, Matt, the study that you were referring to. It was referenced by Ken Rosenthal and Eno Saris of The Athletic, but basically saying Major League Baseball is conducting a vast study in response to injuries. This is back from March. That a study includes approximately 100 interviews with a wide-ranging assortment of subjects, including doctors and former pitchers, and that the league intends to form a task force once the study is completed. It's unclear if the task force will have any input or authority. It's my favorite part, beyond offering recommendations to the team. In that same article on The Athletic, they talked to Dr. Keith Meister, who's the Rangers head physician, and he's basically talking. He's the one who mentioned the sweeper and changeups as two pitches that are really bad. And they say in their article, hey, we can't find the proof that what this guy is saying is true. But again, like, I think that highlights maybe what makes this such an interesting conversation, because even if we get to a place where we can say, hey, the problem is that throwing over 98 miles an hour, or throwing a sweeper, or throwing a split change, like, those are the three things that, let's say 3x your likelihood of an elbow injury. Like, then what? Like, do you say you're not allowed to throw 99 miles an hour anymore? Like, do you say that, like, hey, we're just banning the sweeper, we're banning the changeup? Or does it just sort of fall on the teams and then the pitchers to just say, like, well, we're comfortable with the risk and we think the sweeper's an effective pitch, and if our guy gets hurt, he gets hurt. And if you're the pitcher who needs to go out there and be successful in order to get paid, like, that's where I think this gets really, really interesting. If it's on that level, if it's pitch clock, sticky stuff, that kind of, like, easily fixable at a macro level, then I think it's, maybe, Matt, there's something there. But if we're getting into specific pitches and, and specific velocities or something like pitch counts, whatever the thing is, like, I just don't know how they'd regulate that.
Yeah, it's definitely tough. And honestly, I feel like we would have to go through several more years of multiple teams dealing with a rash of injuries this way for there to really, like, be any sort of change, whether it was pitch clock, whether it was, okay, we're going to allow sticky stuff, it can be used again, or we're going to increase the time in between pitches that you get. Like, I'm not counting on there being any sort of change. I mean, I think MLB is looking after the bottom line. I don't think that that's a controversial statement or belief to have with the league. And ultimately, the pitch clock they stand by. Although I do feel like games have sort of slowed down a little bit more. Like, they were really, or maybe I've just gotten used to, like, 220, 230 feels like normal now, whereas before it felt fast. But sometimes I feel like games are still kind of dragging, and I think, man, like, I thought we had a pitch clock. What's going on here?
Yeah. Another super chat from Saki Bomb. I do feel like the Dodgers specifically slow play their pitchers more than other teams. I feel like the Dodgers load manage maybe more than other teams, yet it seems we lose rookies every year. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, yeah, what was it, Daniel, like a week and a half ago that we were all complaining that both Robleski and River Ryan, or whoever it was, got taken out after like 4 2/3, and the Dodgers get criticized for that. And then here we are. I mean, that's what's interesting, is I don't feel like the Dodgers have been the team that just throws guys out there to throw 125 pitches and wear it like old school. It feels like they take precautions wherever they can, and yet the same outcome.
Yeah, no, look, if you want to blame like overuse, you could look at like Walker Buehler from back in 2021, like Clayton Kershaw, like back in the day when he was pitching on 3 days rest in the postseason. But other than that, like, the Dodgers have done what they can to give guys extra rest, like have a 6-man rotation, like slow play guys in spring training. Like River Ryan, this was not a overuse injury. Like, he's only thrown 30 whatever innings, this season, whatever it is. Like, he just, came into the picture over the last month. So it's not like Gavin Stone is the one who's been pitching all year and he's not hurt, but I guess we are seeing the effects of that as well. So it's like, you got to kind of pick one or the other. Like, you can't say, wow, they overused Gavin Stone and now he's got a 7 ERA over the last month, and then get mad like when they slow play guys and don't let them pitch either. Like you were saying, like there's a balance there, and sometimes no matter what you do, like, the guy's gonna get hurt. So like, it is what it is, I guess. Like, I don't know what you could do differently.
Yeah, trying to pinpoint why this happens. Like, we can have ideas and theories, like, oh, well, they should slow play them, but then the guy still gets injured. Like, is that a fluke, or is that because slow playing doesn't matter? These are all the things we don't know. Let's end with this. Let's shift topics briefly, Matt, and talk about some injury updates we did get from the Dodgers. Let's end on a positive note, besides the fact that the Dodgers won tonight. Tonight will be a little bit of a shorter show, just given that it's impromptu and whatnot. But let's talk about 3 guys in particular: Tommy Edman, Max Muncy, and even Mookie Betts. We'll start with Betts. He played in a simulated game. I believe it sounded like faced a couple of pitchers, is expected back on Monday. What other information, if any, do we have beyond that?
Well, he's going to be playing right field, which I know you and Anthony covered, and I know you've been beating that drum for about a month. You were saying to just put him back in right field.
I said the only 2 times I've ever had a good prediction was saying Mookie Betts was going to play shortstop, and I nailed that, and then I nailed right field. So I told Anthony I'm going all in, and I'm going to say he's starting games in center field in the postseason because that's the next metamorphosis of this prediction. So there you go.
I do sort of agree with that. I think if they are going to put him in the outfield, just put him in center because you have other options that you could figure out, I think, in the corner spots. Yeah. But anyway, that's a different conversation. Yeah. So Mookie will be back playing right field, batting second in the lineup, but that stuff has obviously been covered. Max Muncy and Tommy Edman started their rehab assignments tonight with OKC. I know Muncy had a double that Edman scored on. I think Edman might have had a single. Both played at 6 innings. So, it's looking there. Dave said they're probably about a week or so away. So, I mean, they won't be first to return. That'll be Mookie Monday, Walker Buehler likely Wednesday. Even Ryan Brazier, who's supposed to be, he'll be back during the Cardinal series. Dave didn't say when, but my guess would be, probably one of the first, probably Friday to start it. And that could potentially line up with Muncy and Edman. I know in your interview with Katie about Edman, she mentioned that, that would be an interesting series for him to be back in St. Louis. So I think the Dodgers are going to want to make that happen as long as he's healthy.
Yeah. Looking at the box score, Edman was 1 for 3 with a single and a run scored tonight. And then Max Muncy was 1 for 2 with a double, an RBI, and a walk. So, again, I don't think any of us are like overly concerned about the numbers here. It's just getting these guys reps. If anything, I'd love to hear how, Edman did in center field basically would be a more interesting report to me, just because he had started a rehab assignment with St. Louis, but had not been playing the field yet. So the fact that he was in center field, I think was a positive one for the Dodgers. Of note, by the way, Justin Robleski, 5 2/3, 5 hits, 5 walks, 5 strikeouts, 2 earned runs. So, not exactly the most encouraging start from Robleski down in AAA. But I mean, Daniel, what's interesting is, let me ask you this. I'm going to sort of, as all these guys come back, I think we've talked about this. There's some fascinating roster decisions that the Dodgers are going to make. And Matt and I, when we talked earlier this week, it was like this quote about Nick Ahmed. And it was like, hey, what happens to Nick Ahmed when Butts comes back? And he's like, well, we're going to have some tough decisions to make, that kind of thing. I think Nick Ahmed's sticking around if Mookie's playing right field. Like, I think there's a non-zero chance that if Rojas can't play shortstop every single day, which it doesn't seem like he can, at least not yet. Like, I mean, I don't know who they're going to move because Ahmed still seems to make the most sense. But if Betts isn't playing shortstop, like, do they have to keep him around? Which, by the way, Ahmed, like, sneaky, like, not terrible offensively. I mean, given the standards that we've been accustomed to this year, I mean, like, a 240 batting average, like, is fine for me. So what do they do when Mookie comes back Monday? And then let's say Friday, Edman and Muncy both come back. I mean, who are the 3 guys that get moved?
Yeah, I think that's the key. Like, you might, like, a guy like Nick Ahmed might survive Mookie now that Mookie's playing the outfield, but he ain't surviving Muncy and Edman. You're talking about 3 moves here. Like, I think Pages will probably get optioned. Where we've seen
he's the only guy that has options, by the way, not necessarily because he deserves it the most, but because he's the one guy they can remove from the roster without losing permanently.
Yeah, and I would be curious, like, as opposed to, I guess they're going to need 40-man spots for all 3 of these guys, right? If I'm not
just the 2, not Mookie,
okay.
Just the last 2.
Okay, just so 2. They're going to need 2 40-man spots, which means, like, I think Nick Ahmed gets DFA'd for one of those. I think that's kind of an easy one, and then the other one, Kevin Kiermaier, is probably next on the list. But if you like his defense in center field, then, like, you maybe you throw Jason Hayward back on the IL. Like, someone goes on the IL. I really don't know. Like, unless Kiermaier is getting DFA'd, I don't know what the easy answer is. And Chris Taylor is another name who's maybe gonna be back eventually here. So obviously he's not someone you're rushing to clear a roster space for, but we're probably going to see him at some point again. So a lot of tough decisions here. And I guess that's a good problem to have as opposed to not really having anyone. Obviously, whoever you're subtracting to bring back Mookie, Muncy, and Edman, like that's a huge upgrade.
The
So
net
you'll
plus.
like, as tough as a problem as it is, like you're happy to make it.
Yeah, looking at the depth chart, to your point, Matt, Muncy and Edmund are both on the 60-day IL, and the 40-man roster is full. So 2 people will have to be moved off of the 40-man, which could very well coincide with some of these moves. So if they've got to clear 3 spots, we mentioned Pages, especially if Mookie's going to be playing right field. Pages seems like an obvious choice because he can be optioned. So that's one. The other 2 spots, I mean, the guys that are in contention, I would say, are Ahmed, Kike Hernandez, Ahmed Rosario, who like never plays, Jason Hayward, and Kevin Kiermaier. Like 2 of those 4 or 5 guys, based on the Kike quotes, I think he's pretty safe. Again, like, I mean, I guess Kike or Ahmed Rosario could technically play shortstop behind Miguel Rojas. But if you move Pages, you probably need to keep Kiermaier around, because as much as we hate Pages in center, like they don't really have anybody, a ton of other options out there either. So, I mean, Jason Hayward, to your point, Daniel, feels like the obvious guy here. Matt, do you think it's good? I mean, tell me the alternative. I agree with you. My reaction is the same as yours, but unless it's Kiermaier and Ahmed, do you think it's those 2?
I think those are the guys. I
hope so.
I think Ahmed has done well in the role, but they have enough coverage at shortstop. They can put. I know Rosario is. I think they're saving Rosario is what they're doing. They're preserving him for once they DFA Ahmed, and then they're going to have a full blown opportunity for Rosario. He'll be ready to go, nice and rested. I think he's an option to play shortstop. Kike can play shortstop if he needs to. Even Edmund can play shortstop. So I think Ahmed, and I think Kiermaier, he's already been DFA'd once. He cleared waivers and was still with the team. So I think the Dodgers will run the risk of just DFAing him, hoping he clears waivers again, and then they could re-sign him to a minor league deal and then let him spend, the next 5 weeks with OKC, or maybe they then bring him up once active rosters expand. Maybe he's the one position player they call up, and so he's only down in the minors for a brief period, and that is rolling the dice because there's no guarantee. Like somebody could decide, he made a great catch for the Dodgers that night, and now we want him playing center field for us. So I feel like that's where that ends up going. I know Hayward hasn't lived up to kind of his bounce back season last year, but it also helps to be Freddie Freeman's best friend. So yeah, I think it is Ahmed and Kiermaier.
And
go ahead, Daniel.
Sorry. I do think like if there's another like 40-man move, I do think like they could also just throw Kiermaier on like the 10-day IL, just so you don't like lose him completely, and you have him kind of ready to go. Like, I don't know how hurt Chris Taylor is at the moment, if we're being completely honest. Like, he probably, like, if they needed him, he could be active right now. But get the guys who aren't hitting, it's fine to just send them to Camelback Ranch for a couple weeks, work on their swing or whatever, and then if other injuries happen, then you could activate them or send them on a rehab assignment and then bring them back. So I think in a perfect world, like, you would like to keep them, like, guys like that in the organization, but there are only so many 40-man spots to go around, and they are going to need to open up 2 of them. And obviously DFAing Ahmed and Kiermaier would kind of be the easiest way to do that.
Yeah, and just so 2 things. One, September 1st is when rosters expand. So I had the same thought as you, Daniel. It's like, throw one of these guys on the IL for a couple weeks and just tell them, hey, on September 1st, you'll be back and you'll just be on the roster. But the problem is, you just referenced the Dodgers. There are no obvious, like, normally you're like, okay, what, Nick Ramirez, is he floating around somewhere on the 40-man roster? Like, those guys aren't on here. Like, if we're talking about guys that have spots, they're not on the 60-day IL. Here are the names: Nick Frasso, Kyle Hurt, Landon Knack, Bobby Miller, Michael Peterson, Justin Robleski, Diego Cartaya, Hunter Fiducia, and James Outman. Like, those are the dudes that are in the minor leagues and on the 40-man roster. Now, if you go 10-day IL, you add guys like Chris Taylor, Mookie Betts, obviously, Blake Trinan, Brusdar Graterol, Walker Buehler. So, I mean, those are the guys which we haven't even talked about. Walker Buehler, by the way, is going to need a spot on the active roster, but that's a pitching side. So, I mean, maybe is it like, depending on Graterol's health, like, do some of these guys go to the 60? But my point is just to the Kiermaier and Ahmed conversation. There's not an obvious, we'll DFA this guy and then we'll just slip somebody onto the IL, because none of the hitters that I just mentioned, like, are guys that are going to be DFA'd. I mean, Hunter Fiducia would be as close as possible, but that wouldn't make a ton of sense to me, given sort of the trajectory he's been on and just sort of the role he might play in years to come. Michael Peterson, like these are the only guys really. But again, I think both those guys have value on the 40-man. So, Matt, did you have a thought on that?
Yeah, I figured it out.
Okay.
Brent Honeywell, thanks for coming, but we need a 40-man spot. Nick Frasso, Kyle Hurt, they could get recalled and then put on the 60-day IL to open up 40-man spots. That's an option.
Which do they accrue? I forget. I mean,
it will start. I mean, that is the trade-off. Yes,
they accrue service time and they get paid big league money. So I'm sure either of those guys would be definitely be on board with that.
I mean, yeah, I think the Dodgers will just sort of bite the bullet at this point to figure it out.
Also, like if River Ryan, if his MRI comes back, whatever, he might go straight to the 60-day, and that opens up a spot right there. So, well, someone could get injured this week as well. Like, for all we know, like the way this has been going. So.
Because and Ryan Brazier, by the way, will need a 40-man spot as well. Sorry if I cut you off there, Matt.
No,
but he's also on the 60-day IL.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. The Dodgers
and Yamamoto. If Yamamoto comes back, he's on the 60-day IL.
The good thing is the Dodgers have a very creative and smart front office that I'm sure they'll find a way to make all this work. And like Daniel said, maybe hang on to the guys that they want to sort of keep in the organization without possibly losing them on waivers.
All right, we got one more super chat here from Tim G, paying us in a currency that, you might have given us 7 cents or $15. I don't know, Tim, but we're grateful either way. I want you to know that. He said, time for another day off for Shohei. Shohei's, in a little bit of a rut here. My vote is never any days off for Shohei. I'll just take my chances that at some point he busts out and it's going to be big. But Matt, what do you think? Time for a day off for Shohei Ohtani?
I mean, I don't think the Dodgers can really afford it. Their lineup needs all the help they can get right now. And look, I know that he's been a little bit streaky at times, but then he connects on a home run like he did. Friday night, and hits one 440 some odd feet. And so it's Shohei Ohtani. You kind of you live with the strikeouts because you end up getting a lot of the other production. Not even just the home runs. If he gets on base, he can steal pretty easily, and so you just kind of take it.
1 for his last 16, Daniel. Any concerns there?
No, I mean, I think it's just the ebbs and flows of the season. And like Matt said, they like the way the Padres and Diamondbacks are playing, you can't really afford to give Shohei a blow right now. I guess maybe once Mookie's back, like that lengthens the lineup a little more. So maybe you could give him a day off. But at the same time, like I don't like he's a DH. It's not like he's on his feet all day. Like he just takes his 4 or 5 at bats. I don't know what a day off isn't probably going to, maybe it like resets him mentally a little bit, but I also think if you ask Shohei, he wants to be in there. And like Matt was saying, like he could connect and get hot at any time. So I'm not too concerned about Shohei Ohtani of all people.
Yeah. And he did have an off day 2 days ago because the whole team had an off day for what it's worth. So I'll take my chances with that one. So, all right, folks, that's going to do it for the post-game show here tonight. Again, a shortened one, impromptu one, but here to talk River Ryan. So we appreciate everybody, almost 2,000 people in here across Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube as we have recorded this show. So we greatly appreciate that. Folks joining us after the fact on YouTube, thank you. Folks joining us via Apple, Spotify, or Google Podcasts, thank you as well. As Matt has referenced a couple times, make sure you check out DodgerBlue.com. and check out our YouTube page when this is done, because we will have some post-game interviews with Dave Roberts, River Ryan, that kind of stuff will be posted on the YouTube page. So you can go get the full quotes, the full context, see the body language, all that kind of stuff from us on that as well. So that is Matt. That is Daniel. I am Jeff. As always, we appreciate you guys. Enjoy the rest of your night. And as always, go Dodgers.